So in Arknights CN newest event they announced a remake of the beginner banner. It made me realize that we don't have a tier list for the current one. So in this video, I will make a tier list to help you decide who you should reroll for. And to be honest with you, rerolling in Arknights isn't very important mainly because 1. All the beginner operators are good. 2. Arknights isn't a one character can carry everything type of game. You have to invest in a proper squad to clear stages, and the game does a good job of giving you free strong operators early on in the game. So this tier list is for people who want to min-max and have a relatively smoother experience. I will make this tier list into 2 parts, one for the early game where I will rate the operators at Elite 1, and the other is where the operators are at Elite 2 for people who care more about the end game. Let's start with the Elite 1 list. Our first operator here is Archetto. Archetto is an anti-air sniper, which means she prioritizes attacking aerial enemies. Her talent at Elite 1 restores 1 skill point to all deployed sniper allies that have an offensive recovery skill every 3 seconds. This talent is very helpful since all her skills are offensive recovery charge. Plus it supports other snipers with offensive recovery skills, which is especially helpful in the early game when you want to pair her with Cruise Alter, and Blue Poison's first skill if you have her. Her first skill is a 200% attack that splashes a 150% attack to 3 other nearby enemies. She has splash damage or multi-targeting on all her skills, which is a good thing since AoE snipers have high DP cost and are not very effective outside of the 6 stars, so in a sense, she works similarly to Ayafyala when she substitutes AoE casters. Her second skill works better against multiple enemies. It immediately fires an arrow that deals 120% attack damage 5 times in a row. The arrow can repeatedly ricochet to nearby enemies that have not been targeted yet. This skill works similarly to chain caster attacks. In conclusion, she performs well against multiple enemies, but she lacks damage against a single target, which is not really a big deal for her at the early stages of the game. So she goes to the A tier. Flametail. Flametail is a pioneer vanguard. This is a great archetype for the early game as it can block 2 enemies and generate a good amount of DP. Her Elite 1 talent is Vanguard Swordsmanship. After dodging an attack, the next attack deals 2 hits. This talent is a bit underwhelming at Elite 1 since you don't have access to her Elite 2 talent, which grants her physical dodge, but nonetheless, she gets some physical dodge from her second skill. Her first skill generates 6 DP and dodges the next physical attack. The dodge means a guaranteed activation of her first talent, but the cooldown is long for the little DP generated, and one activation of the first talent doesn't make up for it. Her second skill generates 12 DP, deals 210% attack as physical damage twice to up to 6 nearby enemies and stun them for 0.5 seconds. Allied units within attack range gain 45% physical dodge for 10 seconds. A great skill with decent DP generation, good damage with a stun, and some protection for nearby allies against physical damage. Overall at Elite 1, Flametail is more of an early stage DPS support hybrid with a stun and physical dodge. Not having her second talent makes her less tanky and lowers the chances for her first talent to trigger. She also has a big DP cost of 14, which is bad for a vanguard. But nonetheless, she is still a solid operator in terms of lane holding, so she goes to the A tier. Mountain. Mountain is a fighter guard. This archetype is usually underwhelming with only 1 block, abysmal damage, and little to no utility. But Mountain is the exact opposite of that. His first talent at Elite 1 has a 20% chance for attacks to deal 140% damage and reduce the target's attack by 10% for 3 seconds. The trigger chance is low, but the extra damage and survivability help with his second skill Demerit, which we will talk about in a moment. His first skill is Left Hook. The next attack deals 200% attack damage and hits 1 additional target. This is a generic next boosted attack and I don't recommend using it. His second skill Sweeping Stance is what makes him a top tier operator. He can switch between the original state and the following state. Defense minus 25%, attack range reduces, attack plus 50%, block plus 1, attacks all blocked enemies, and restores 5% max HP per second. This is one of the best lane holding skills in the game. He has a permanent plus 50% attack, can block 2 enemies, and constantly restores his HP, making him self-sufficient, and not in need of medics in most cases, and it only have 8 SP cost. As for the demerits, the attack range reduction isn't a problem since enemies will run into him anyway. The minus defense isn't a big deal since he has good healing, but it can be a problem when facing hard-hitting enemies. Overall, he is a great lane holder who is independent of medics or other supports. You can place him by himself in a lane and he will perform amazingly. With that being said, he goes to the S tier. Suzuran. Suzuran is a Decel Binder supporter, which means she decreases enemies' movement speed by 80% when attacking them. Her first talent at Elite 1 increases the SP recovery of supporters by 0.2 per second. It provides decent support for supporters and it helps with her second skill's massive SP cost. Her first skill increases her attack by plus 60% and attack speed by plus 15. This skill activates automatically. The extra attack speed helps her slow enemies better, and while the attack buff is good, it isn't something you bring to sell binders for, so in this case she could have been better off with more attack speed or other utilities. The skill auto activation isn't a big demerit since it has a low SP cost and her talent helps her charge it faster. Her second skill increases her attack by plus 30%, attacks hit up to 2 enemies and it has an unlimited duration. It sounds great until you see the whopping 92 SP cost at level 7. With her Elite 1 talent it becomes 73.5 SP, but even so it's still a big cost. In conclusion, she is a decent supporter but lower rarity operators and her archetype can do the same job if not better in some cases, so she goes to the B tier. Thorns. Thorns is a Lord Guard, which means he can launch ranged attacks that deal 80% of normal attacks. This archetype is really good in the early game as you can deploy them behind defenders or vanguards to do extra damage, especially in cases where you can't deploy your ranged units safely. His first Elite 1 talent poisons the targets when attacking, dealing 65 arts damage to them per second, lasting 3 seconds, and the damage is doubled against ranged enemies. Damage over time can help a little against high defense enemies or special enemies who require several hits to be defeated. His first skill is Attack Up Gamma. It increases his attack by plus 60%. It has a good SP cost and uptime, making it a good source of consistent damage. His second skill is Protective Spikes. Stops attacking. Attack plus 40%, defense plus 70%. When hit by an enemy's normal attack, launches long-range spikes at up to 4 enemies in front with a 0.75 second cooldown. It's a mix of defensive and an AoE damaging skill. It allows for some utility in the early game where you don't have many operators, so it can be a good substitute for OE guards or offensive defenders like Juggernauts and so on. In conclusion, Thorns is a versatile and strong DPS operator that you bring to all stages. He goes to the A tier. Weedy. Weedy is a pusher specialist, which means she can attack 2 enemies at the same time, push them with her skills, and she can be deployed on both melee and ranged tiles. Her first Elite 1 talent allows her to deploy a reserve water cannon that lasts for 15 seconds. The water cannon can attack one target and push it away slightly. Her first skill is Barrel Burst. The next attack pushes the targets away along the attack direction moderately, dealing 135% of her attack as physical damage and stun them for 0.9 seconds. It's a generic first skill for pusher operators, although it does more damage and has stun as a secondary effect. Her second skill is Hydraulics Mode. Attack interval increases, attack plus 170%, attack range extends by plus 1 and becomes a long-range AoE attack. Attacks now push enemies away slightly. This skill has an unlimited duration. This skill suffers from high SP cost and a weak shift level of 0, which is passable since the enemies you face in the early game don't have a lot of weight. Overall, she is a very niche operator that you will rarely use, and the lower rarity operators can do what she does just fine or sometimes even better with their second skill. And now for the Elite 2 list. Archetto. At Elite 2, Archetto gets her second talent. When deployed, she gains 1 shield. Restores 7 skill points after the shield breaks. It offers a little survivability on deployment, but it doesn't regenerate, making this an underwhelming Elite 2 talent. Her third skill is Thundering Arrows. Attack plus 15%, attack range plus 1, attacks hit 3 times in a row and target 2 enemies simultaneously. This follows the trend in her other skill of attacking multiple enemies, making it perfect when facing a swarm of drones. As for her modules, both are insignificant as they don't add anything game-changing for her. So in conclusion, she is a good anti-air sniper who shines when facing multiple enemies. She suffers from her skills being charged by attacking enemies, but her first talent makes up for it. As for the reroll, it's safe to reroll when getting her. Exusii in my opinion is better, and it is easy to get since she is in the Kernel headhunting pull, which rotates fast and has the Kernel locating where you can make your own banner. All in all, she is a good unit, but she doesn't have much impact on the late game. She goes to the B tier. As for Flametail, she gets her Elite 2 talent. When deployed, all Casimir's operators gain 22% physical dodge. It's a nice support for other Casimir's operators, but most importantly it boosts her skill's dodge significantly. Her first talent upgraded to now hitting all enemies after she dodged the attack, which corresponds well with her third skill since she will be able to block 3 enemies. Speaking about her third skill, she gradually gains 8 DP over the skill duration. Attack interval reduces, attack plus 60%, block +1 and gain 80% physical and arts dodge. With this skill, she can dodge almost every time. That means she will deal more damage from her talent and the attack boost. The +1 block means she will be attacked more, leading to her talent activating more often. And let's not forget that she also dodge arts damage. Her first module lowers her deployment cost by -4 when first deployed. It's mostly paired with her second skill for general content. Her second module raises the physical dodge from her talent as well as her attack and defense. It pairs well with her third skill for harder content. In conclusion, she is the best Pioneer Vanguard as she doesn't have the weakness of being early stage units. Flametail can tank damage from elite enemies that appear later in the stage, and her damage doesn't fall off either thanks to her first talent. She is an S-tier operator, but she doesn't have an impact like some other operators that will be in the S-tier. With that being said, she goes to the A-tier. Mountain. At Elite 2, Mountain gets his second talent, plus 10% defense and plus 15% physical dodge. Great help for his survivability since he loses defense on his second skill. His third skill is Earth-Shattering Smash. Attack interval increases, attack plus 70%, attacks hit 2 times, increases the activation rate of the first talent to 55%, and each attack pushes up to 3 surrounding targets away moderately. It's a decent skill that offers good damage and crowd control, but it fails to compete with his second skill that offers healing and an extra block for an unlimited duration with only 5 SP cost at M3. Overall, Mountain is one of the best solo lane holders. He is self-sufficient and has low DP and SP cost on his second skill. With that being said, he still holds his place at the S tier. Suzuran. At Elite 2, her first talent doubles to increasing the SP recovery rate of all supporters by plus 0.4 per second, a great improvement since both her second and third skill have high SP costs. She also gets a second talent when enemies in her range that are slow are inflicted with a 20% fragile effect for an equivalent duration. 20% fragile means that enemies will take increased art, physical, and true damage by 20%. Her third skill is Foxfire Haze. She stops attacking. The attack range expands, the effect of her second talent increases to 1.7 times, and all enemies within the attack range are slowed. Heals all ally units within range for 11% of Suzuran's attack every second. Because all enemies within her attack range are slowed, they will be inflicted with the fragile effect, increasing your DPS unit damage by 34% at level 7 and 40% at M3. The slow keeps the enemies in your DPS unit's range for a longer time, and she has healing as extra support for other healers. Her first module helps her charge her skills even faster, while the second module increases her slow duration and the fragile effect by 2% while also lowering enemy attack by 8% when they are slowed. Overall, Suzuran is the best supporter in the game, in terms of support of course. Her second talent and third skill have all that you need to face strong enemy bosses and other hard content in the game. She goes to the S tier. Thorns. At Elite 2, his first talent gets improved to dealing more poison damage, making him even more effective against high defense and aerial enemies. He also gets his second talent that restores 3.5% of his max HP every second if he attacks for 2 seconds. This talent makes him less reliant on his teammates like other Lord Guards, making him viable to deploy in various situations, like lane holding by himself. His third skill is Destreza. Attack range expands, attack plus 40%, attack speed plus 16, and ranged attacks no longer deal reduced damage upon the second activation of this skill and afterward. This skill has an unlimited duration, and its bonuses are twice the base amount. This is Thorns' main skill. It gets rid of the reduced damage on the ranged attack, and on the second activation he gets permanent attack and attack speed, making this skill one of the best in terms of consistent damage that you can use in every type of content the game throws at you. His module adds the equipped trait of attacks, dealing an additional 10% of his attack as arts damage, and increasing his talent's poison damage. Overall, Thorns is a strong and versatile operator that you can bring in any type of content. He gets rid of the damage reduction from his trait, has a bigger range with insane attack and attack speed for an unlimited duration skill, and doesn't struggle against high defense enemies, while being extra effective against aerial enemies. He is jack of all trades, master of all. He goes to the S tier. Weedy. At Elite 2, her first talent gets upgraded to now the water cannon, lasting 5 extra seconds. She gets a second talent that increases the shift level of the water cannon's normal attacks and skills by 1, and Weedy will restore 1 SP per 3 seconds if the water cannon is located in one of the 4 tiles adjacent to her. The SP restore is great since she relies on her skills to do anything, and the shift increase for the cannon helps her do some crowd control while charging her second skill. Her third skill is Liquid Nitrogen Cannon. Immediately fires a compressed liquid nitrogen cannon. dealing 320% arts damage in an area and pushing enemies away significantly for 6 seconds. Enemies hit by this ability take true damage proportional to the distance traveled. If the reserve water cannon is located within 4 tiles, it will also activate this ability. At level 7 the shift strength is 2 and it becomes 3 at M3, so together with her water cannon, they have the highest push force in the game. Her first module increases the shift level of skills and normal attacks for the water cannon, and improves the SP restore, and grants plus 20% attack if the water cannon is located within 4 tiles of her. Her second module reduces the redeployment time of the water cannon by 8 seconds and increases Weedy push force by 1 if she is balking 2 or more enemies. The first module is for general content while the second module is more situation dependent. In conclusion, Weedy is the best at what she does, but her use cases are rare. She is the worst in this list in terms of how impactful the operator can be to your account. She goes to the C tier. These were the reroll tier lists for the beginner banner. In my opinion, the best operator to get is Mountain, as he is a great lane holder for both early and end game. The only operator that I would personally reroll if I get is Weedy since she is very niche. Also, take into consideration that the kernel operators are easier to get, so Suzuran isn't a great choice especially since she is an endgame operator, so it's better to save and get her when you are ready to E2 her. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for watching.